Well, what you're looking at right here is probably the best, and I know what some people are going to say. It's probably the best survival gun you can possibly own. It's a lowly, and it's not lowly in a lot of ways, 12 gauge, single shot shotgun. The reason I say it's the best for survival purposes, and I can name a number of things I'd rather have in some ways, but as far as simplicity and something not breaking on you, it's probably the best damn thing to have. There's really nothing to break on it. Pretty much, it's got, you just open it up. There it is. You load it, and you fire it. And when you open it up again, it ejects. That's really what it is. You pull the hammer back to fire it. That's all it is. That's all it is. Now, I could say stuff about, a 308 or 308 Winchester to 7.62 by 51 millimeter and stainless steel with synthetic stock and a good Redfield scope, or an AR-15 or plain 22. There's a lot of things that have advantages, but if you really had to have one weapon and you could not get parts for it anywhere, and that is the only thing you could possibly have, this thing is probably the thing you want because it's not dependent upon magazines and it's very light to carry. Even my Luigi Franchi 500 12 gauge, it's actually a little lighter than the Remington Featherweight, I don't know, from years ago. And this thing is lighter to carry. The problem is, it's one shot, but usually that's all you need for hunting game. A lot of times it's all you need. The other thing is, I just ordered this, though. I'll probably do a video on it later on. I'm going to go down to the range or whenever I get to the range. They have these inserts you can put in this weapon in here. And what it is an insert that will fire another caliber. So, Dina Arms makes them. There's a couple places that make them, actually. What happens is you could fire like a various center fire ammunition or different shotgun ammunition. Like you could fire 20 gauge. They have ones that you can sell for 20 gauge. You fit a 20 gauge in there. It's a little insert about this long. That's all it is. You can fire the 410 gauge with the 45 Colt, the old 45 Colt, or you can fire the 45 ACP Colt, the 44 Magnum, the 38 Special 357 with various different inserts. The 9mm. Actually, I just ordered a 9mm, the 45 ACP, the 38 Special 357, and the 44 Magnum. I don't know if I mentioned that. And also it fires the rimfire 22. And the rimfire 22 is offset. It's like offset because it's the firing pin will hit not directly in the center because it's a rimfire, so it'll sit in there offset. Now, the only thing that's wrong with that is this. It's not so much that it's got a 3-inch barrel, maybe loses some velocity. The insert might be 3 inches that's in there. It doesn't touch anything on the inside. But your aiming might not be that great because you're not really using any sights. But it's not that bad because the 12 gauge is a fairly long barrel. You could probably aim this 12 gauge without having any good sights on it. Then you could say a 45 pistol that wasn't a full-size pistol, or 9mm or 38 that wasn't a full-size pistol, because you could just sight down from here to this bead, right? And it's going to get you in a ballpark. I mean, you're not going to be that far off. You might be, I don't know, maybe 6 inches off at, 30 yards or something. It's not going to be that bad. Actually, I'm gonna test this out and see how this works when I get those inserts in. Actually, I have a bunch of 9mm ammo. Most of my 9mm ammo has been loaded up with 115 grain jacketed hollow points that are CCI primers and 4.9 grains of Winchester 231. But I loaded some up with Blue Dot, some other, I don't know, I got like maybe 500 of those maybe or 3 or 4 or 500 of those. They're a little hot. I don't like those too much. I'll probably fire them in this thing with that insert, because that insert, it's like you could probably put some pretty hot loads in it, because this is a 3-inch magnum. It'll work with a 3-inch magnum or a 2 3/4-inch magnum. It don't matter. That insert, it fits right in here. When you have the insert steel plus this steel, if the rounds are a little hot, they'll probably work okay anyway. So I'm going to test fire those 9 mils in that. The other thing is, if you got something like this and you're firing something from the same weapon, like I've seen guys that were like firing like a 308 from a bolt action. When you reload ammo, you usually resize the brass. And every time you resize that brass, and it's like a sizer, you put it through. I should explain this stuff better, but show it and demonstrate it, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to talk through it right now. But when you resize that brass, it shrinks it down to standard dimensions. But a lot of times what you could do is, if you fire from the same weapon all the time, you don't have to resize that brass. So for instance, like this doesn't have an insert for 308, but I'll give it an example. If you had like a 308 in a bolt action, and you didn't put really hot loads in it, like you didn't load it up really hot, and you use regular ball ammunition, your regular non-jacketed lead ball ammunition I'm talking about, you can fire that pretty cheap. You don't even need to, like, you might weigh the charges. You can use a scoop. Just put the scoop in there of the powder. Take out the primer. You don't need to resize the brass, because the brass has been sized for that particular chamber. And you can actually reload it a hell of a lot more. That same type of principle can be applied to something like this. Say, for instance, you got the 44 Magnum in here, with the insert. So you got a specific, I forgot what the 44 Magnum takes. I know it's hot. I used Hodgdon 110 for the Magnum powder with the Magnum primers, the large pistol primers. But, you don't even have, once you weigh the charge, you might want to just use the scoop. You knock out the primer, you reseat the primer. You will not really have to resize that brass if you're just putting it back in the same insert again. You can just, put the new primer in it, the new powder, like the Hodgdon 110. That's what I used. That's what I like for the Magnums. I personally liked, and you can use a plain lead projectile. It doesn't even have to be jacketed or a jacketed hollow point or a full metal jacket. You just use a plain lead projectile, and when you don't reload the brass, like resize it when you reload it all the time, the brass, you could reload it, I don't know, like many more times than you could normally. So there's an advantage to having something really simple. Like, in other words, if you reloaded 44 Magnum for, like, every 44 Magnum out there, you want to resize that brass. But say, for instance, you only had it for the 44 Magnum insert in a single shot shotgun, right? The special insert that goes in there. If you fire that weapon, you pull out, you knock out the primer, you put a new primer in there, you don't have to resize that brass, because if it's going to go back in the same insert. And, in other words, you can have like a couple pounds of powder, 500 primers, and a bunch of lead projectiles that you can even make out of from wheel weights, from lead wheel weights. And, you can go really old school. Because one of the things that actually, when you talk about these survival situations, I know there's all this stuff they talk about with, what do you do if there's no electricity? What do you do if there's no internet communications, whatever? What do you do if, the grid is down? It's the same as no electricity. But really, what do you do if there's no food? And the fastest way to get food is to hunt for game. Yeah, you can grow food, but you might not have 6 months or 3 months to grow your food. You might want to shoot a critter and get the game and live, So having something like this is pretty good. And say, for instance, ammo was kind of hard to get by. If you had like a 12 gauge, like a single shot like this, with a lot of different inserts for this, It's like whatever ammo you had. If you had 22 long rifle, you could put an insert for 22 long rifle in there. If you had 44 mag, you happen to have that, you can use 44 mag. You use 38 special, 357 special, 9mm 45 caliber in the Colt, and also the 45 ACP. The automatic Colt pistol. That one. The one's for the autoloaded pistol, the one for the old 6-shooter Colt. That type of thing. And also the 410 gauge shot shell and a 20 gauge. All from the same weapon. Yeah, it's single shot, but you know what? It works. You see the big fat possum coming by, boom, you got yourself a meal for a couple days, right? I mean, it's something, right? It's something. That would, if there's really some really crazy thing that happens, you really want to be able to hunt with something. And if you want something that's going to be ultra, ultra, ultra reliable, it's that. And like I said, I remember carrying this around in the woods. I was like, it just flabbergasted me how lightweight this damn thing was. It's like nothing. I don't know what the hell it weighs. I forgot, 5 pounds or something. Maybe not even that. It's even less weight than my Luigi Franchi 500 with the aircraft steel, whatever the hell, aircraft aluminum, whatever the hell that thing's made out of. That thing is lighter than the Remington featherweight. And there's really not much to go wrong with it. And these are dirt cheap, too. And as far as regulations on firearms, this would be like the last firearm that would be regulated, for crying out loud, if they ever got to that extreme. A single shot shotgun. That's another thing. But if I was out, if somebody told me I had to go out in a boonies someplace, and I had to be out there for 6 months, I don't know, maybe I would take my AR-15. But there's something about, well, you know what? You look at the cost of an AR-15, $1,000, plus magazines, and you really got, if you want to play around using different types of ammo, you got to do an upper barrel change, right? With this, you just put that insert in there. And I ordered those things. I'll show you what they are, and I want to take them down the range and try them out, especially shoot up those 9mm with that blue dot powder. They're a little bit hot, but they're definitely not going to be too hot for this thing. If you got an insert in that, plus that steel and that, I mean, I've fired in my Beretta, but they're not extremely hot. But I usually don't load stuff down up that hot because I used to fire a lot of thousands of rounds, and if you put them, in like hotter ammo, you wear the weapons out faster. And I just don't feel like spending money fixing weapons and all that kind of shit like that. If you just, they're still strong, but I don't like loading them up that hot. But this is actually your most versatile weapon. I probably should still do some separate videos on just how you can really load up ammo really cheap without even having special equipment. And the other thing is, the less calibers you got in the weapons, the better. A lot of times it gets confusing when you got too many calibers. I got the most common calibers, like the 38, 357, the 44, the 12 gauge, the 9mm, the 308, the 30-06, and the 5.56. I don't even have a 40 Smith & Wesson or nothing like that. But yeah, that's another one you can get in this, though. You can also get the 40 Smith & Wesson insert for this, too. So if you got a 40 Smith & Wesson, you can use that insert with this 12 gauge. So that's probably the better thing to get for a true, survival weapon. There is not much you're going to break on this damn thing. There's not many moving parts in it. This can go in underwater or something like that. I mean, it's not gonna screw something up on the inside where it's not gonna function anymore. It's not gonna, I don't really see. There's really nothing around it can break. You don't have that gas tube going in here or that gas tube up on the top like on the AR-15. There's not many moving parts. It's like there's nothing to really field strip on it too. There's just that. I mean, that's that's all there is to it. You run a cotton swab through it, right? There's not much to it. So to me, this is probably, although I kind of like the other stuff that's got more rounds in it stuff, this probably is your number one bet in a survival weapon especially with those inserts that can go in here that can carry all those different calibers, like I mentioned. You know, the 44 Magnum, the 9mm, the 45 ACP, the 45 long Colt with the 410 shotgun, the 20 gauge shotgun, 22 to 22 caliber. They even have the 22 the Magnum, the 22 Magnum rimfire too. They even have one for that. Pretty much the 40 Smith and Wesson. So, you know, it's a very, very, very versatile weapon. And, you know, the other thing is too, like, since it doesn't automatically eject the cartridge, you might need that cartridge to reload. So you'll take it out, you know, and you put it in your pocket and you save it for later and you can reload it. You know, it's not going to be laying on the ground someplace in the woods and you got to try to find it or something. I mean, it's got its pluses and minuses. Yeah, the big minuses is one shot at a time. But even this, you can load pretty quick, man. You can load pretty quick. Boom. Boom. You know, you just put it like that. Boom. Right? Boom. Right? Right? Pretty quick. Pretty quick, because you don't, you know, it pops out automatically when you do that. Right? You pop another one in there. And that's how you load it, right? It's not that slow. I mean, you could probably fire 15, 20 rounds in a minute with this damn thing, if you really had to. But, you know, as far as aiming, and fire 15, 20 rounds. But you can fire pretty quick. You can fire pretty quick, even when for hunting game with this. It's not like one shot and you got to wait 20 seconds. It's one shot and maybe 2 or 3 seconds later, if you're good at it, you can have that thing loaded up again. I mean, you know, it's probably best if you have 2 shots, but, you know, the other alternative would be to have a side-by-side or an over-under, but they get to be quite a bit more money than this and quite a bit more weight. This thing is light as hell. And when you're walking around for a lot of miles, you will appreciate the weight on this thing being very light. The other thing is, if you're lighter and you lose a lot of body fat, then you can carry a lot more equipment too. That's something I got to work on again, actually. Just as a side note, one time I went ballistic on working out. I dropped 87 pounds in 5 months flat, and I kept it off for the next 4.5 years by working out 3 hours a day. But that's me, you know. I just seem to be like, if I don't work out 3 hours a day, I gain weight. If I work out 3 hours a day, I'm chiseled. It's the way it is. I don't know. Whatever. So that's another thing. That's another subject, another day.